I'm just trying to take attendance as we're sort of looking at this. I think we're already at the point where we have a quorum.
Hey, Brian.
Yep, we
Linda,
are.
how are you?
Did you want me to get the meeting started, Linda?
Sure, sounds good.
Right, looks like just about everyone's here. Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Revere High School Building Committee meeting, project number 22. Today is Thursday, November 4th, 2021, and the time is 5:33 p.m. Would you like to take a roll call, Linda?
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
I think we see Mike Picardi.
I am present.
Excellent. Mayor Arrigo. Stacy Bronston Risso. Absent for both of them. Susan Gradalisi.
Here.
Dr. Kelly.
Here.
Carl Svensson.
Here.
Dr. Corella.
Here.
Jennifer Hayes.
Jennifer told me she's not going to be able to make it tonight.
Okay, great, thank you. Absent. Rich Biscay.
Here.
Don Ciaramella. Don't see him on the list, so I'm gonna note him as absent for now. Nick Rystrom,
Here.
Jerry Visconti,
Here.
and Patrick Keefe.
Here.
Excellent, thank you, everyone. Brian, are we good with doing some housekeeping items to start off with?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute.
It's just gonna say, Brian, you're on mute. All right. We're going to start with meeting minutes from the last meeting, which I'm gonna pull them up on the screen. I think these, Brian, these went out in the earlier documentation.
I believe they did, but I didn't have a chance to check before I logged on to this. I'm pretty sure they went out. If the people remember seeing them. I can look right now.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen anyway. One. So these are the meeting minutes from October 21st. My apologies. There we go. So these are the meeting minutes from the last meeting on October 21st.
Motion to approve the minutes?
Rich Biscayne made motion.
Second,
Sorry, who was that? Who seconded it?
Michael Picardi.
Thank you, Michael. All right, so we will do a roll call for accepting meeting minutes for October 21st. Mike Picardi,
Yes.
Mayor Rodrigo, and Susan Gravellisi,
Yes.
Dr. Kelly,
Yes.
Carl Svensson,
Yes.
Dr. Corella,
Yes.
Rich Biscay,
Yes.
Nick Rystrom,
Yes.
Jerry Visconti,
Yes.
and last but not least, Patrick Keefe.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to stop sharing, and that is all we have for housekeeping items for this week of this meeting. Brian, are you taking over the
Yeah.
reins today?
Sure, I'm gonna share the screen. We have a project update that Perkins, Eastman, and Warner Larson are going to walk the committee through. I might chime in here and there, but we'll do a quick schedule sort of process update and a 2-week look ahead after the update. I figure we'd get right into the update first.
Brian, did those meeting minutes actually get emailed to the committee?
I haven't had time to check, Carl, but I will. I'm not positive. I thought they did.
Okay. I don't know if we should be approving minutes that nobody read, but in the future, I'd like to get them a little earlier if possible.
Sure. Yep, I'll check that. Bob, you want to take it away?
Yeah, you can probably advance through the first couple, just kind of a setup. So this is where we were as of the last school building committee meeting. Since this meeting, you can go to the next slide. Jack G might want to mute.
Yeah, please, please mute if you're not speaking.
So since the last meeting, the Revere Housing Authority, as you all know, voted to remove the property, I guess, or not to make it available. So even without a vote of this committee, it certainly diverts our attention. And that basically means we had 3 options, 3 viable options in the middle here. So Iracola Park on the existing site boundaries and constraints. We had a version of Iracola where it showed some expanded land acquisition. And then of course we have Wonderland, and that's the, I guess not the full Wonderland site. Certainly it's the medium version of that, the 2/3 version. So next slide. So I'm going to work backwards from the Wonderland site. What we've done is we've taken some of the comments that we've heard over the last couple of building committee meetings and started to try to address them. So this plan you're seeing right here is nothing new. This is the plan that you had seen previously. Some of the comments and critique we heard were about the bus and car loop in the queues. You know, are we really maximizing it? We also heard that really we maybe needed to move more parking to the fields. Try to surround the field to put as much parking with the field between the building and the fields as possible. So it obviously serves the after school purposes as well. And also to look at in all the options, the service and approach. So we did a refinement to this option. These are just, you know, graphically depicting how we can transfer some of the parking and maybe a different attitude about the bus and car loop. So next slide. You can see what we've done here. It's a suggestion, and anything that we're showing here really will need to be further vetted with our traffic engineer. And again, any comments and questions we hear here. But what we're trying to do is maximize the bus loop and the car loop So instead of having them as two separate loops right in the front of the building, what we're doing is showing that the cars would come in over at the light at Wonderland, and it would really own the frontage of the building. So we're trying to maximize the queue. In this case, we have a 52 car queue. Ty, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's significantly more, maybe even double technically the car queue at the existing school. Although we know that the parents are using all the surrounding streets and they're using the parking lots as well. In this case, we've separated the bus loop and we have it going around the back of the building. And the idea here is that this can be controlled so that back loop is really an emergency access point. It can be gated and shut after the bus drop off and then controlled for pickup as well. But what it does is it goes around the back of the building and it drops off pretty much at the entry close to the gym. So it's still a relatively short walk, pretty much common area for both cars and buses to drop off at the front of the building. The service access on this one remains the same. So we're using the other light over at the shopping center. That can be where cars ultimately exit, but it also is the service access in. We're showing some maneuvering so that tractor trailers can pull forward and then back into the loading area. The loading on that side, of course, would need some landscaping and greenery to keep it screened so it's not as visible from the major roadway. And then what we've done here by getting rid of that bus and car loop up front and just keeping it primarily a big car drop-off zone, we've been able to increase the parking. So I think on the far left, you can see the parking reduced. I forget the number. It was in the 200s and it dropped to about 125. That does two things. It not only shifts more parking towards the fields, but where we're trying to connect to what might be the crossing over the railway, it allows a friendlier kind of pedestrian zone or walkway. We do have loading in that area, but at least this affords us a little bit more green space and kind of separation between cars and trucks. So that's something, when we zoom in on something like this, we'll work on the separation and try to avoid any kind of conflict or crossing between the pedestrian and the loading. And we think we can achieve that with relative, control or certainly mitigating that kind of a conflict. We're also showing the pedestrian walkway, which would connect along the front of the site and ultimately over to the Wonderland T station, the crossing over at the T station stop there. And, over time, the hope is maybe that's part of a raised walkway or connection, and not knowing exactly where the train station would be. It's possible it's where we're showing the crossing over the tracks. It could be in the more in the northeast corner as well. What I can do is keep going through these and we can come back with questions unless somebody has something very specific to be answered on this site.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ryan. Would there be parking underneath the building here also? Because the school will be raised on the Wonderland site?
Yeah, so it could be. Right now, what we're showing is the elbow room to have all surface parking. So we're showing all surface parking. You can imagine certainly, needing to raise the building that we could put, maximize some of the parking under the building as well and either get more green space or kind of move that property line further west.
Okay.
Right now, this shows all surface parking though.
Thank you.
Ty, was there anything else to add on this one?
I just had a question.
Sure.
I see at the eastern side, you can see where there's a drainage ditch that enters the kind of border, but then it sort of disappears. In reality, it goes through there. Is there a plan for how to handle or deal with that?
That would need to be culverted, just like it is downstream and upstream. So that ditch is, exposed just within this property, and then in either direction it goes under. So it would need to go under in this case.
So then you're saying it would be located underneath the baseball field or
Yes.
some of
it
the
would-
open space?
Correct. It would be culverted or piped underneath. So, yeah, the baseball field would be on top of what would be an underground drainage way. And then it would could potentially daylight on the east side there. Future development, they're probably going to want that also put culverted underneath as well. But for the purposes of this project, you wouldn't need to.
So then would the site drainage potentially would be all discharging into that pipe or the open ditch at some point?
We haven't done a drainage design at this point. So I would have to defer to our civil engineer. Once he gets his hands on a design like this, he can look at where the drainage goes, whether there's closed drainage elsewhere on site, or we can do some on-site, underground retention. That would all have to be looked at. So I'm sure that would be part of the drainage plan in some fashion. But at this point, that has not been sort of determined.
Thank you.
So these were just some, again, some overlay thoughts to see if we could maximize the car loops and the bus loops, and again, shift some of the parking. In all cases, I just want to remind everybody, these are feasibility studies, so they're not completed designs. So you're not seeing detailed parking layouts. There's, whatever site is chosen, it gets developed into a much greater level of detail. And again, we'll be informed with more traffic analysis and feedback from the city. Brian, you can go on to the next one. So moving back onto the existing site, this is the option that you've seen previously, sometimes referred to as the bow tie. You're seeing that the existing property lines along with the culvert wedge the building, and that also kind of pushes the building pretty much against Route 60. In this case, we were showing, fields on the far left, pretty much the bulk of parking in the middle. I believe there's 255 spaces underneath the building, but again, 650 total. So we took a look at this one too. You can see right now we were showing just preliminarily the bus loop coming in, I guess on Cary Ave and getting the front of the building, and then the cars were coming in on School Street and looping around. That's a concern for Cary Ave. It also doesn't really leave a lot of space for the bus. The bus and cars are competing. So the next slide shows, again, a variation. This is just one iteration, but what you're seeing is the building and the fields. In this case, we've now maximized the car loop. So if the cars are coming in off of School Street, they really own the front of the building as far as drop off. And there are options here. They can exit out True Street. They could return along the approach drive and exit out onto School Street. It's doubtful in this case, but they could possibly use Cary Street. In this option, we were suggesting maybe the buses come in True Street, but we know that the far end, the northwestern end of True Street is kind of that five-way intersection with an island. That's a concern for the navigation. So, to do this, it would take some work at the other end of True Street. But that's only, one scenario. We had the buses coming in and skimming the northern side of the site so they could drop off students into a secondary, or really actually that's the main entry on the north side. And it's possible that the buses just come in off of School Street as well, just as the cars do. But their drop off point, again, is kind of on the north side of the building as opposed to the cars that are looping around. It would still take a bit more work. This is certainly a pretty tight site. You can see the culvert is the purple line that runs through from the west to the east. The service drive here we're showing could come off. It could come possibly from Cary. I'm not sure that we would want that, or that the corner can be made very easily. it could come in off of School Street just as the cars do, but then kind of have a straight run along the south side of the building, backing into the service and loading zone, and then ultimately exiting onto Route 60. So in this case, we've got a total of 56 cars that fit in the car queue. So that's a substantial amount. I guess one of the benefits on building on Aracola Park is that you're really drawing the cars in a good length into the site, which is creating that longer queue.
Bob, I see Jerry Visconti's hand up.
Sure, Jerry.
Hi, I got a question, and I'm not sure if it was a design that's been produced yet or provided. Has there been a design taken for Aracola Park that doesn't consist of any property taking?
Yes, this one does not have any property takings. This one that you're looking at here.
Okay, this
And-
is the one. Okay,
Yeah, well, I'll let you know. I'll let the greater group know when we get to the one option we have that does have property takings. Everything you're looking at now is within the existing property lines.
okay. All right, great, thank you.
Bob, want to keep clicking?
Yeah, we can continue through, which is your segue really.
That's
into-
actually the segue. This option that we're going to discuss right now is the option that includes potential eminent domain takings, and we'll touch upon it in the next slide or two.
Yeah, so this option, again, you've seen this version, and we're going to show you a refined version. Again, based on the comments, in this case, we have cars coming in on School Street. You can see there's a red line, really. They have the northern loop into the site and then back out True Street. The buses here were shown separately coming off of, I believe it's Cary. And you know, there were some comments about, you know, these being a little bit too separate, not enough ways in and out, maybe a little bit too small. And so what we did is the next option shows a variation where, again, you know, there's options with the bus. We're showing the yellow dash line where the buses are coming in True Street, but given the concerns, they could come in off of School Street and the main drive, still drop off on the northern side. Cars would be able to come in that long approach and then use the frontage of the building. In this case, we're showing that it's possible. We could have a larger car loop in front, or we could take a series of houses that are shown here in kind of in the middle of the site, not take them, basically not take that land. So technically the building fits around that, and with the separate car and bus loop just a little bit further north, that could remain. And overall, we see that there's, as far as the parking, we have 375 surface and about 275 underground. To put that in order of magnitude, I think for a school this size, usually the rule of thumb is 12 to 15% of the enrollment would be the teachers. So we're talking somewhere between 300 and 365 staff potentially. So, you know, the underground parking here is a little bit shy of that. Could potentially be increased if it were to become all teacher parking underneath the building and then leave surface for students and visitors and for field use. But in this case, you can see, you know, I guess the benefit might be that that it might require less land in this variation to make it all work.
And just real quick, I see Patrick Keefe's hand up.
Brian, thank you. I just want to, you talked about parking, and that was something that cued my interest. Where, as we know, vertically is probably the only way you can go. Is there something against building more stories to a parking space or a parking garage? That would probably alleviate some of the issues. And we do know, and I'll take Everett High School into consideration. They built a wonderful high school, and they found out recently that a lot of the students were parking across the street in the MDC lot. That's since been removed, and that's caused a lot of issues for the Everett High School, not having much parking, because seniors drive to school, not all of them, I know when I went to high school, I drove and I would go park 2 streets over in front of a neighbor's house. As we know, 25 years later, that's going to be very difficult in that neighborhood. So I think that we would probably want to get ahead of that.
Yeah, Patrick, I think we're gonna definitely study maximizing the underground parking. And if, I think there's definitely, the further down you go, there's a cost discussion, but I understand we're balancing off cost with need here and cost with what's the right thing to do. So I think we'll continue to see how big we can get a single level underground, and then we could do some little study with the design team to see if that went down another level, what the trade-offs would be cost-wise.
Thank you.
And just quickly on the screen right now, so to be clear, the first options on the existing site that we looked at do not include any required eminent domain takings. The options that we'll get into in the next few slides don't either. This really is the only option that would require eminent domain takings. They're shown, the area is shown in the black shape here. This is a little bit different than last time, a few weeks ago, when we looked at this. The design team felt that almost all the properties on Cary could be worked around, and we could reconfigure this area in here. So this is probably getting to be as close to a as light a touch as is possible with eminent domain, understanding that it's still would be a massive impact to those addresses listed here on the screen. But my Zoom controls are in the way, but this is 15 lots inside that black line, 5.5 acres, about 7 million in assessed value. The way we've been just accelerating the assessed value to have some dollar concept of what these properties might be worth equate to about 8.3 million in value. But I just want to stress that the prior option and the subsequent options we're going to get into do not include eminent domain. This is the study that the team was asked to do of if there were properties that can be taken, show us another version of this site. If there are no committee questions, I think we'll continue on the slides. We've got a few more options to go through, then we can revisit any of these.
Yeah, so a lot of what we've been focused on when we look at now being down to 3 options, we know that we were hearing from abutters over the last few weeks, their concerns. We know that the existing site on its own with the culvert as a constraint really squeezes the building into, uncomfortable tightness. And we know that, with Wonderland, there's a land purchase there and there's concerns about lost tax revenue, as well as the walkability. So what we've been doing over the past week and a half is just exploring what could we do if we looked at the culvert, either breaking the building and having some of the program on the other side of the culvert, or diverting the culvert, adhering to maybe a 30-degree bend and keeping it, just giving ourselves a little bit of wiggle room. And so you're seeing here just some architectural sketches that are roughing out what could we do with the building, different shapes of the building, what programs could go on the other side. I think we thought the gymnasium and the health and fitness, as well as the central admin, would be probably the obvious choice. Although I don't want to pretend that that's a great separation, because it does pull some of those programs out of the building literally and away from the heart of the school. And remember, we are a 4-story building and the gymnasium is stacked over locker rooms. So it's still a vertical piece. So you don't have a gym down at ground level in this diagram. It's really lockers and then stairwells up to a gym. So challenges with that. On the bottom page of the page, you can see another series of options that are looking at just how can we reconfigure the building. The one on the bottom right really seemed to start to come together and offer maybe an improved heart to the school, where it was offering access from multiple sides of the building, and it was pushing the academic wings to the north, which started to nest a little bit good into the site and kind of gravitated the bulk of the building away from the roadway. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see a Again, this is just an architectural sketch, so I'm not expecting everybody to understand what's inside, but I can point out that you're seeing the academic classroom wings with science and special education on the north side. Those are 2 wings, 4 stories. Nested in between them is the custodial and mechanical space, which means that service is now coming in off the north side of the site, which kind of mirrors what's happening with Romney Marsh. And in the center of the school, you have the heart that connects all the floors. It's the main cafeteria. It's where the auditorium, tech and art spaces all feed off of. And into the bottom right is the gymnasium. So again, the lower level would be locker rooms and fitness. It just so happens that this gives us, this is the first option that has JROTC all on one floor, probably in its best configuration that we've seen. And it seems to start to connect the pieces internally pretty well. So this does come at an expense. And what it does is now the building has given itself some elbow room. Things are working a little bit better. It shifts a little bit from the roadway. And you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, it leaves some open space. It could be fields or it could be parking. Our initial thought would be with the gymnasium right there, it might be good to have just open field space, buffered from the roadway. And it could serve the PE physical education program, but it could be parking. And we know that this building shape as well can accommodate a large amount of parking underneath it because the classroom wing to the upper left has now bitten into what was some parking area previously in the previous option. So good in that it sets the school in more of a greenscape, gives it some elbow room. It certainly works a lot better, but it does mean that a little bit more parking is going to translate into underground. So the next slide shows really a site plan of pulling this all together. The white square in the corner of the site is central administration. And you can see otherwise the remaining white footprint of the new school building. In this case, we can see cars could come in off of School Street. They have a long approach to the school. Total of 56 cars can queue up in this length. We've got parking along the way to kind of break it up, but also to remain closer to the fields. We've got a total of 275 surface parking spaces, and so 375 underground, which is, again, about the right amount, maybe a little bit over for what might be required for staff. So that might be considered staff parking. In this case, as cars come in the entry loop, there's also plenty of options for them to exit Carey Street or further down on Janverin, as well as continuing out on True Street or even out to Route 60. The purple line here at the north side, it represents the culvert with the 30-degree bends. In this case, I think we originally thought, maybe buses come in initially on True Street, and then the more we looked at it and talked with others, we were realizing that that's a complication and there might be advantages to having the buses come in off of Route 60, just as they do maybe for the Rumney Marsh School, and continuing on the east side of the site here. So we're creating a bus drop-off, really separate from the car drop-off, but the students would all filter into the center of the school, into the heart of the school. And the bus drop-off also could be something that's controlled and gated, so it's not just open all day. And again, off of Route 60, we would have access for cars to come into the underground parking. That might be the staff access to the underground parking. So this one seems to it's just a different approach to where the buses and cars go. I think from a building perspective, it seems to work pretty good. And it's just their early iteration of it. So happy to hear more thoughts on how this is looking to others. Ty, was there anything else to mention on this site?
I think one thing you're showing is a sort of a two-sided building. So that lends itself to having buses. The bus drop off is sort of right where the hand is there in the green space. They're coming in that side. cars are coming in from the other side, meeting in the same central location. So there's something nice about that I don't think the other options really had. So just want to add that. The other thing is that the service, I think Bob mentioned it briefly before. It sort of does double duty. It's right across from the Rumney Marsh service area. They would basically use the same driveway and back up into their loading dock right there at Rumney Marsh. So that has a nice synergy.
Bob, I think I'd like to just add a couple of comments as well to this. I know Ty's been talking mostly over the site slides, that have been presented to the building committee. But I think the point you made earlier when you're referring to the Wonderland site is really important to remind people about this as well, in that we are working with GIS-based information, which is regional mapping, not detailed site survey yet, and the aerial photography. What we're showing here are test fit diagrams that we know programmatically can work, but we don't necessarily know all the minutia of the constraints, particularly that vehicular connection along the south side. Of course, the building has probably some flexibility to it in terms of that north-south dimension, but that is the pinch point basically on the site. And moving the culvert is really what opens up the possibility here, I think, and that's the exciting part of this plan, in my opinion, that it can be done without eminent domain. So I just wanted to point out, though, that when we have more detailed information, there will be a process, and reminding the building committee that there will be a process involved, but there'll be some push-pull. I do think that having this kind of flexibility in where you come in and where you exit the site is really good. Relative to that bus configuration where the buses actually are shown going across the front of Rumney Marsh, it's actually not uncommon when we're designing middle high school complexes to have some kind of a shared bus connection. And since that's already being used for buses, it's really good in a way, whether you're administratively putting middle school students and high school students on the buses at the same time or not, you could use the same driveway potentially in that way. And the variable of whether you route them through the green space where it says PE field or parking, or allow the high school students to disembark in front of Rumney Marsh and walk to the high school so that the buses could exit directly back out to Route 60, I think allows some flexibility in the design with regard to how the buses circulate. I think those points are kind of important to keep in mind, that this now doesn't require eminent domain, relocates the culvert, opens up all kinds of possibilities, but we will be, if we move forward with a plan like this, looking at some push-pull in terms of where things actually end up on the site.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, David. The last thing I'll say is that while we're showing a lot of options for cars to exit, possibly enter the site and drop off, there's a real desire to keep the southern edge of the site very much pedestrian friendly, kind of the walkway and the filter. There's another point where students could enter the building along that edge if desired. If not, they could certainly make their way to the main entry or the east side entry. But that pedestrian pathway continues all the way to Route 60, where the eventual light and crossing would be. So we're trying to reinforce that connection, and the more we can evolve that and keep it very pedestrian friendly, the better. Any questions? Or Brian, I don't know if you have anything to add on this one either.
So what are the issues with moving the culvert? Money, it costs money, but what are the other issues?
Time. Money and time, Joe. So that is actually what I was going to mention. The keeping this being able to push this building a little further up into the site over where the culvert is right now. It's going to really, the two tough things about that are going to be an enabling phase to reroute that culvert. So, I mean, we're doing site work all over this site. If we're building on this site, there probably isn't a square foot of this site that won't be dug up, but previously we were planning on working around the culvert. So there is a cost that we're going to work on, a cost premium to reroute the culvert. I think the trickier thing in general is it's probably going to add a little bit of schedule to the initial part of site mobilization. It's also going to make temp parking a lot more of a trick that we have to figure out how to pull off. This building kind of scooching left, screen left here in getting into the existing parking lot is going to make this a more challenging phasing plan than building purely on the baseball diamond and out towards the highway. So the three things to keep in mind that become a little more challenging with this layout are rerouting the culvert, temporary parking, and in an overall sense, the phasing of the initial sequence of the job and how quickly we can get out of culvert work and into building a building work.
Are there any engineering significant problems with moving that culvert? And are there any regulatory problems?
Regulatory, we're going to be looking into. I did have a quick discussion with Nick, and sorry, Nick, to put you on the spot, but we think that, you know, this certainly can be engineered to happen correctly. As I understand it, you know, there is a shelf life to this culvert as it is. At some point, it is going to have to be replaced, whether or not this high school was being built here. So I think it's an opportunity for it to be replaced with more lasting materials, but I think it's totally doable from an engineering point of view.
Yeah, along those lines.
Good.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to kind of follow up on Brian's comment. So along those lines, engineering, from an engineering point of view, it certainly is achievable. There are some issues with the pipe itself in terms of hydraulics right now that would need to be addressed. Again, there is also a shelf life, as Brian had mentioned, to the existing infrastructure. Right now, that's a corrugated metal pipe, and as you can imagine, it doesn't play well with water for a long period of time. So there are some, you know, concerns to be dealt with, but it certainly is, from an engineering standpoint, something that is certainly achievable.
And so given the big advantage of no eminent domain, what are the other downsides here? We don't quite know, you know, the north south of the building because it's tight. What are the other things that worry the architects?
I think Bob, if you don't, we've talked with Bob a lot about just sort of how what him and his team's feelings are, comfort level with the design here. But before I asked Bob to just sort of comment on his level of comfort with this, I think the tangible one here, I know I mentioned it already, temp parking is going to be a challenge. And I think this is going to be a plan on the screen that we're going to pursue. And you'll see it in the couple week look ahead we're going to do. Laying out some phasing plans, Joe, becomes important here because we can no longer guarantee that the existing parking lot can be maintained. So instead of just the annoyance of a school being built on the fields, that construction site has just gotten, you know, could be halfway through the existing parking lot. So we need to figure out how to displace those cars, where to put them. And that is a big challenge, but I think it's a challenge that we have figured out on previous similar tight jobs, on-site build jobs, and I think we could do it here. But generally speaking, from a design point of view, I think Bob has less reservations, and I wouldn't even call it a reservation. It's a challenge. Temp parking is going to be a challenge with this layout.
Yeah, for me, there are less worries with this plan. There's a lot of improvements, just even thinking about the service and even just the students, the majority of classrooms really kind of gravitating a bit further away from the roadway. I see this one. This is version 1 of this plan, and it's got a lot of room to grow and shape and mold. I see a lot more things working better. I think that the two things, but they're indicative of all the plans right now, are we'd love to see the classroom wings a little bit shorter. And we'd love to not have the gym necessarily on the second floor. This one possibly provides that opportunity. but the other options don't. So it's really not different than the others in that way. It's got really good orientation, actually, from a energy efficiency point of view. This should work really well. And I think the end result is, for the student experience and the community experience, you don't have a building sitting in a parking lot. You have a building sitting in green space or plaza space. It's going to feel a lot more like a campus. And the bottom right corner where we say PE field or parking, that's really the trade-off. It's relocated and freed up space in that corner. It might not be the preferred place for parking, but it might be part of the solution too for the temporary parking or contractor laydown space. It certainly kind of gives us some options, at least with that. I would say, so I kind of have less concerns, but it's really up to the city and the school how they feel. It does convert more of the parking to underground. And is that good or bad? I think the number we show here is 375. That's probably a little bit north of the faculty count or estimate that we would have, but pretty close. So maybe that's a great use. But then thinking about the community use, is the underground parking going to be accessible for the community who are accessing the fields? Are the number of spaces that surround the fields enough? Yeah, those are questions, I guess, for the city.
Thank you.
And this is Patrick. I have just another question. One of when we talked about this prior site that everyone seemed to be in agreement was keeping the field house. It doesn't look like that's the case in this plan. Am I correct?
Yeah, good question. And so we didn't show it, but one of the sort of offshoot studies we did with this was to say, okay, here we are now. If we're diverting the culvert, which wasn't in our toolbox prior, is an option. What does it look like to keep the field house? Because it's a larger space than we can build, even though we'll get the same number of courts. It won't get you the track inside of it. Right where the mouse is right now, right where it says multi-purpose field, is right about where that gym would be. So you can see it completely displaces the multi-purpose field. But it would allow us to lop off the bottom right leg of what you're seeing is the building here, because that's where we're showing the gym. So the question is, can we fit a multi-purpose field there? And it does fit, but it separates the gym. Maybe that's acceptable, but it also separates the field. So you'd have a baseball field on the far west side, and then you'd have the multi-purpose field on the far east side. We also looked at, if we flop the classroom wing to where the gymnasium is now. So you basically had both classroom wings on the east side. Would a multi-purpose field fit over the diverted culvert? And it doesn't quite. It fits technically, but it really doesn't give you room to maneuver cars and approach and access. So, that's the answer. We looked at it. We could show the studies, but it didn't seem to be helpful.
Thank you.
Just looking around for other hands up here. Any other committee questions, comments? I do see Mike Picardi put a question into the chat. Could we use the park on East Mountain Ave to be staging area? Yes, Mike, that's well, actually, I'm not going to say yes. Yes, we are looking into it. This area right out here, which is a park, since we're already going to be in the Article 97 business of basically filing legislation to move Ericola Park to this location, to flop it from the highway side to the neighborhood side. We might, because of the challenge of temp parking and swing space on this site, we might end up looking at this island becoming temp parking and then be improved upon. It's existing to be put back and improved upon afterwards. But that's the kind of thinking that when I say this version of this site's going to be challenging for temp parking, we're going to have to figure out how to run that existing building with the reduction of parking. So part of that might be trying to offset parking temporarily into some of these other areas on the town. I have been in touch with the city assessor to just look up some history on that lot. It is a park. And I think if we're going to touch it at all, it'll have to be handled as part of the Article 97 process and then replaced and upgraded at the end. Any other questions, comments from the committee? If not, we can move into just real quick, some next steps on schedule, and we can always come back to these if there's further questions. Bob, did you want to finish this up?
Nope, that's just an overview slide of where we are now with 4 options, and barring any votes or requests for us to examine something different, these are the ones that we're going to continue to explore.
Yep. One thing I'd like to throw out for the committee between now and it's just something to think about between now and the next meeting. Look at these slides. I would really compare the what I'll call old no eminent domain option to the new no eminent domain option. I'd really ultimately like to hear from a committee. I know that the team, we feel that the new option is superior in a lot of ways to the old option. So perhaps by the next meeting or something, it would be nice to see if that's a consensus, not only on the team, but on the building committee, and maybe just focus on the newer no eminent domain option here. Excuse me. So I'm going to just switch PDFs really quick. General feasibility schedule, really not much different at all from last month. We're going to meet again in 2 weeks. By the meeting at the beginning of December, we're going to coalesce together a little bit of a history of the process and run through of current options, including construction schedules. That's going to set up going to December and January meetings in terms of whether it's school committee, city council. We'll schedule a community outreach session dedicated to the project as well. But the goal is to keep developing some of these items. In December, we'll be adding the final sort of pass at budgets, construction budgets, total project budgets for these options. By the beginning of December, we'll be showing you construction options. And to jump into 2022, next year, we're still looking at bringing this all home by the end of January and choosing one of the Thursdays in February for the building committee to make the final determination. We would then move directly into schematic design. That's all these months in yellow here. The preferred solution that we'd be submitting based on the February decision by the building committee would rattle through an MSBA, a Mass School Building Authority approval cycle. We've got to get them the submittal by March 3rd. We meet with their facilities assessment subcommittee 2 weeks, 2 separate meetings in the middle of March. And ultimately the board of directors blesses the decision. Moving forward, we continue on until fall of next year, developing that single chosen option, working out a lot of these designs, the details that both inside the building and on the sites. That all leads towards a September schematic design submission to the MSBA. That schematic design submission is what sets up what's called the project scope and budget agreement. That's a real key document from the MSBA that really locks down the plans, how the building's designed, how big the building is, where everything exists, what the budget is, what the schedule is. MSBA approves that in October at their board meeting, and then we would be seeking city council approval for the entire project to authorize the full budget. Again, keep in mind, we're only doing a feasibility study and working on a feasibility study budget right now. So ultimate action, city council approval of the preferred option and schematic design next November. All of our schedules, when we show you construction schedules in the coming weeks, are triggered off that decision being made in November, early December, and the project hitting the ground running from then. Because until the MSBA's project scope and budget agreement is executed with the city via approval of this board and the city council, there's really not a project for us to run with. So all of our schedules queue up on approval of the project by city council next November or December. Jumping back into more of a look ahead for the next couple of weeks. On the existing site, we're going to continue to update that new option, no eminent domain, option 1CB that we talked about. We're going to get a little bit deeper into what relocating that culvert means, both financially and from a schedule point of view. I do think it's going to probably push out the construction schedule a little bit, in that this we couldn't get right into digging foundations, et cetera. So I think there's a chance that it adds a few months to the schedule, speaking to Joe Lewin's question earlier. We're going to work on site phasing concepts. Again, what I keep mentioning is that option, while I think a lot of us like it, does take away existing parking, and we really have to get into quantifying existing parking, deciding where it's going to go. As Bob noted, that the benefit of that plan is this great contractor staging out near Route 60. So that's good. We won't have to compete with that crew, but we do need to right the ship on temporary parking for the school. We're going to continue to minimize the required takings with eminent domain. I think we're pretty much there. I'm not positive that we could get that list any less on the one option that does have eminent domain. We're sort of a question for the committee. And again, we don't need a decision tonight, but if that option is if we need to pursue it at some point, one of the first steps is going to be to get appraisals of those properties. We would first need to get a quote, much like we got a quote for the Wonderland appraisals that the project's doing. We would need to get that, bring that to this group. This group would have to approve it. So if folks are really thinking about supporting that option, we need to hear that in the next few meetings so that we can get some appraisals going. We're also going to be working with the city to develop an outreach plan to those 15 impacted properties. I think it's 13 properties, 2 of which have side lots, just for the record. But if this option is going to go forward at all, there's going to have to be an outreach plan. We're going to work with the city to develop that. We're going to commence a traffic study on the existing site, confirm everything we talked about to really give us some info and give Carl and the team some info to understand where all that traffic's coming from, where it's going, and how to design it right. One of the reasons we do like the new option is that it has the most potential connection points. So whatever we think ends up the right configuration, that option allows us to do it a little easier than the other options. We'll be looking into some more massing level studies of these options, which basically is showing you a little bit more than the 2D maps we're looking at now, seeing what the building massing might look like. And we're going to continue talking about who parks where in these new scenarios. At Wonderland, the appraisals are underway. They're not going to be done in time for the next meeting. So I think probably 2 meetings from now, we might actually have appraisal information on Wonderland. We're going to continue working with the city about that potential commuter rail station. That process is moving forward. From what I understand, there is not yet sort of a project on the street for consultants to react to. Once there is a project in place, if it at all overlaps with our process here, we're going to want to sit down with them and understand where that project wants to put a rail station. Under the hypothetical of the high school project continuing at Wonderland, that'll be something that's really in flux till that project develops. There might be really good reasons why they need that down sort of south, closer to the circle. There might be reasons they want it on the north side of the site. Either way, this project would have to sort of react accordingly. And in the end, that project is also what would be getting pedestrians over the train track. So this potential, I'm told it's not a potential project. I'm told it's real. It's just getting underway. The commuter rail station, I think, has the opportunity to provide a lot of that connection from the central west side of Revere over that train track. How exactly this project would interface with it is TBD until that process gets underway. We're going to ask the consultants to look at a number of traffic studies that have occurred down in that area near Wonderland and sort of put together what could be an additional cost if this committee really wants to see it, of a dedicated school-specific traffic study down there. And further develop the massing studies down at Wonderland as well. So I think for the next few meetings, it's just going to be updates and updates. We're going to be sprinkling in schedule information for construction in the next meeting, cost information in the following meetings in December. But in the meantime, any input anybody had on these options would be appreciated. And specifically, I'd like you to focus on the old no eminent domain and the new no eminent domain sites, and let us know what you think by the next meeting. Otherwise, that's all we had for tonight. Do we want to move on to any new business that anyone has, and we can do a public comment? Anyone on the committee, new business? I do not. So we're going to move into public comment now. We're not going to be doing comments through the chat. If folks have a question, I would ask you to either raise your hand if you know how to do that. If not, we can just go verbal, but we need your name and address for any public questions, any comments. And I do see a Karen's iPad up. If we could start with you, and name and address would be great.
Hi, my name's Karen Martineau. I'm at 96 East Mountain Ave. And I did notice that my home was one that was included in the eminent domain. I do have a few concerns about that, obviously. I have lived in Revere for over 50 years. My 86-year-old mom lives 2 doors down. So to displace just, her alone at that age, I think would be overwhelming, not including everybody else, the other 15 houses. I was here. Actually, I'm a graduate of 1977 of the original high school. So I was here when they built the first one. And it was really not a pretty sight. I mean, there was a dump yard down there, and we had a large mice and mouse infection. Everybody in the homes got them. So I'm wondering if that's going to be another problem for the homes, for the people that are living here. This has been and still is an older original neighborhood. Like I said, I've been here 50 years. I can name probably about 4 or 5 people that I grew up with here that when their parents died, they bought their parents' houses. So they are still living here. And that's how tight knit this neighborhood is. So to take, our homes, and the older people that are still living here, I think would be devastating. Looking at your charts tonight, and looking at Wonderland, I worked at Wonderland and was a waitress at the clubhouse. So to see that torn down, it's kind of discouraging, but to also look at that torn down for over 10 years without nothing going in there, I would think that would be the best site to take, because you're not interfering with anybody's homes, and it still is centrally located for people to get to school with. So like I said, if that's just my thoughts, as far as, where I think it should go, but that's my opinion. And I think a lot of other people. But I did have a question. If and when you guys did start this, it looks like I saw the calendar, but when exactly would you be starting either construction, the old or the new? Would it be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road? And one other second before I back up on that one. When they did build the new high school, and they promised us so much as far as Cary Ave. I'm 2 houses away from Cary Ave. They promised that they would close that street and use the front entrance. Well, I think the gate was probably closed for about a week. And they said, no, we can't do that. So they promised us a lot of promises, and 45 years later, we still don't have anything. East Mountain Ave is like a drag race right now. I have grandchildren that live in my home that also go to Revere schools, and they're not even allowed outside. I mean, during when the buses are coming up the street, and there's a four-way intersection between Cary Ave and East Mountain, and I wouldn't let my dog out. So I just think we're just causing more traffic and problems with another school being built on top of the Rumney Marsh being there. And I think we've had our share of, schools in this area. I think Wonderland is a great pick. And this way we can get rid of that eyesore that, is in the middle of Revere. So, I mean, I know eminent domain came in effect when they built the hill in the Paul Revere School, but you're talking 2 or 3 houses. I mean, this is 15. So, and those, that's what I have to say. So thank you.
Karen. And just to a few of the questions, most of the construction schedules aren't really worked out yet, especially because they could vary by options, but I tend to think spring 2024 is when we're really probably talking about construction happening. If it were Wonderland, it maybe could be a little bit sooner, again, because that's, ready to go as far as the site goes. But some schedules might get us there by the end of 2023 for construction, but I think the more likely scenario is spring. And I know you did mention pest control. I know that's definitely something that if we're building on this existing site, I know we'll be able to do a lot better than was done back in the 70s. That's definitely something we take seriously, and we'll have a whole pest control program to go through when we get down in the details.
Yeah.
Patrick,
Alrighty.
I see your hands up.
Thank you, Brian. Again, and certainly I think that Karen's comments were very, very much in line with pretty much what we've heard from everyone in that area. One of the biggest questions that she mentioned that I think that we've talked about, and I'm not suggesting, and I know it's not going to be easy to get that answer today or even really soon, but for the board, for this body, could we just get a hard cost? I mean, just so we can have an educated decision. If Wonderland comes back and they say it's going to cost $100 million to take that site, then it's a quick one. We know that we can't do it. Like, it's not going to be something we can put on top of the cost of construction and everything else. But if it's in the ballpark and we can find a way, I think it gives us a real option. And I say that because I know that some of my friends on the council disagree with me. We are a huge city. We've grown so much over the last 20 years. You see it with our census, and that doesn't even tabulate everybody. We're busting out of the seams when it comes to the current high school. We're going to squeeze a really nice, beautiful school on a site that, might be the second best option. But if we can do the best option, in my opinion, has always been Wonderland. It's a clean slate. It's not going to be disruptive to what's happening right now. It is the only thing that I don't love about Wonderland would be, of course, the highway, but I think that there's ways to work around that with overpasses and whatnot, because as you all know, people that come to the current high school have to cross highways from Shirley Ave and you name it. But if we could get at least something for our information to say, hey, it's going to be $25 million, it's going to be $30 million, it's going to be $100 million. So that at least we can say, hey, this is what made our decision and this is why we had it. I'd love to have that behind us so that we could make a really good decision, because who knows, what if they did come back and say it's $20 million? I know that I'm saying only $20 million, but that would actually be pretty cool, because that would be feasible,
I hear you loud and clear, Patrick, and we're working on it. We don't have the data yet, but we will. We'll ultimately, before this decision's made, we will have an appraisal, and there will be some sit-down conversations with those owners to see what their number is. The appraisal really means nothing if there's someone else out there lurking and willing to buy it significantly higher than the fair market appraisal. So we both need that appraisal, and we need with the city to sit down with those owners and have a discussion.
Agreed. And let me know how I can help with that. Okay.
You got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Brian. This is Maria Gennari. If I could speak, I couldn't raise my hand.
Sure.
Thank you. As a Maria Gennari, 26 High Street, Riviera. My mom lives on East Mountain Ave. I've spoken at this meeting before. I agree with obviously Karen with respect to eminent domain and any of the houses on East Mountain Ave. But my question is, once construction begins, how long do you predict it will take to come up to complete the project?
Construction of the new building itself I'm going to treat both sites separately. And because one of them, let's say the existing site, it's going to be about a 30-month process to build the building. However, that really just gets us to the point of the new building being open. So at the about 30-month point, could be a little bit longer than that. The building would be ready. The old building would be moved into the new building. We'd still need to abate that old building, knock it down, and build the fields. So I think all said and done, you're looking at about a 5-year construction duration here. We will have much more definitive layouts per option through the December meetings. I know you've been a good participant so far. If you come to the next few meetings, we'll be getting specific with each option of how quickly do we think we can get them done. But a building of this size, especially if it's build a new one and then go knock down the old one and build fields, there will be construction on that site for a good 5 years. Wonderland, one of the things about that being sort of a blank site, we could hit the ground running and build it all at once. It's one phase. Fields happen at the same time. There's no building to demolish. There's no hazardous material abatement phase. So one of the challenges, when I say phasing is a big challenge on that existing site, I not only mean, temp parking, but also it's a 2-phase project. We really have to build the new building, move kids in, knock down the old building, build fields.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, name and address if so? If not, do one more going once. If not, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
Thirded.
And let's see.
All right. Shall we do a roll call for adjourning the meeting? Mike Picardi
Yes.
and Susan Gravellisi.
Yes, sorry, I couldn't unmute myself.
Thanks. Thought we lost you there for a second. Dr. Kelly?
She had to jump off at 6:30 to go to another meeting.
Thank you. And Carl Svensson?
Yes.
Dr. Perella?
Yes.
And Rich Skate?
Yes.
Nick Rystrom?
Yes.
Jerry Visconti?
Yes.
And Patrick Keith?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Great meeting and great information.
Thank you, everybody. And I'm just going to note what I put in the chat. These meetings don't go live to YouTube yet. They will by the next one. But the building committee does have a YouTube channel. All of these meetings end up on the YouTube channel. I'll make sure I email that link around and we have it linked on the website. But otherwise, have a good night. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.